Well, this bolo actually started with a conversation, and Dan gets some really unusual and very cool stones every now and again, and we're always on the phone talking, and so we were talking about, I forget what we were talking about, but he says, "Have you ever seen petrified whale bone?" I said, "No, I love dinosaur bone, but I don't think I've ever seen whale bone." And he says, "Well, I'm going to send you some pictures." So he sent some pictures, and this particular piece just grabbed me. I mean, it's so unusual and incredibly detailed at so many different levels. With the browns and the blacks and just the cellular structure of it. It's really quite incredible. Um, so when Dan and I were talking, I said, "Well, I gotta have it. I gotta have it because I don't know what I'm gonna make, but I'm gonna make something, and it's gonna be really, really special." And so, this bolo tie that we're talking about, this is the end result of that, and it's a newer style for me with the tail feathers that are chiseled at the bottom and the top, and then of course all the very intricate stamp work, which is laid out. But one of the other cool things about this cut is that it's not domed. You can see it's a perfectly flat top. And that really does some really cool things with the way that it reflects light. So one of the other things that is new to some of the work that I'm doing is this type of bezel. It's a very thick bezel. In fact, this bezel is about 1.5 millimeters thick, which it's a lot of work to really get it smooth and really make it look right. Um, there's a lot of annealing to soften the metal, to be able to move it and form it and shape it. But then even beyond that, one of the things that I did with this particular piece is this is semi-castellated. Now, I don't know if that's a real term, but it's a term that I use, um, because it's not a full castellated bezel where you've got the lines that are sawn all the way down through the bezel, and it's not all the way around. I only use it to draw your eye through the stone and through the piece. So it's just I love it. I love the way that it plays with the light. I love the way that it plays with the texturing. It's along with the bezel itself, the weight of the silver itself is quite substantial. This is 14 gauge sterling silver, so it's very thick. You will typically see bolo ties 18 gauge, sometimes 20 gauge. They're going to be lighter, but really, this is a substantial piece, and that's really important when we talk about how the stamps transfer to the back, because every time that you stamp, you're moving metal. So you're moving metal. You're forcing the stamp down with a hammer into the silver, into the softened silver, and then what happens is not only does the silver compress, but it pushes out and up. And so you have to start with a pretty substantial piece to be able to go back in, and it's just tons of hand sanding, to define the stamps. And with a piece like this, we're talking about, annealing and stamping 4 times. So you do the initial stamp work, which sets everything. Then you go back and you heat the piece up almost to red hot, quench it, it softens it. So what happens is, as the metal heats up under the torch, all of the molecules start to separate and pull away from each other. And then when we quench it, it kind of freezes it in that softened state. That's what allows a very deep and accurate stamp along with the chisel work. But again, every time that you stamp, every time you chisel, you're moving metal. So for a very, very clean, defined look, there is just so much time involved and so many different grits of sandpaper to be able to bring it to flat, to remove any transfer that happens to go into the back. So you're sanding it back, front and back, all throughout the whole process. And then, of course, because this is not cast, this is all fabricated. All of the texture that you see here, this is all hand textured. And that's another part of the way that I try to control reflection and detail, the attention to detail, and the way that you actually see the piece. So what it does is the brightness right on the inside along the stone, that also draws your eye to the stone, and it highlights the stone. And then we get like a little bit of a break there, and then we have the outer stamping, and that's bright in the center and bright on the edge. So it just really makes everything pop and stand out. So essentially, then in the back, I'm sure a lot of you collectors, and you see a lot of older pieces that have like the nickel silver pieces that are manufactured and made, and then they're just soldered to the backs of these. Well, these are actually handmade silver. I make them specifically to the size of the bolo cord. So, a little math comes into that, so that you get a good snug fit. You still have movement in the cord without fraying it, but you still have the tension for it to be able to hold properly. And then when you're talking about math too, the tips. So these tips are a little bit different from what you might see. Anyway, so what we have is we have tubing, and then stamp work that's done on an overlay over the top of it. And so when I did these, you'll notice as we turn, the stamping and the pattern is continuous. So there's no seam in this. You won't see it. And the pattern is absolutely continuous all the way around. It's amazing that I can figure this stuff out, because I was not a good math student, because I was convinced, who in the world is going to use this stuff in the real world, right? And now I use physics and geometry and trigonometry every day in my work with jewelry design and also with flutes.